Network. I'm your host, Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us today. We are now in day 4 of the Laquan Barrow, Gary King, and Michael Smith case out of Florida. This really interesting case that's taken all different kinds of turns, and we're here covering it on the Law&Crime Network. I want to tell you what you've been missing and what you can expect today. So each of these men is charged with 1 count of second-degree murder in the killing of 19-year-old Benetria Robinson, a young, beautiful girl that was just at a nightclub in 2015, minding her own business when an altercation erupted, which resulted in gunfire and this young woman being gunned down. Now, these men are also charged with attempted second-degree murder, but from different counts. So Barrow and Smith are charged with 5 counts of attempted second-degree murder, and King is charged with 4 counts of attempted second-degree murder. Now, they are all tried together. However, Mr. King, due to filing a speedy trial, there's been some complications there, a little bit of a complicated issue. It should be noted that there are 2 juries, so King has his own separate jury. And what's funny about that is, based upon what we've seen so far, there's not a lot of evidence as of yet pointing to Mr. King as a shooter in this case. Actually, what we've seen is that 7 witnesses saw the defendant, Laquan Barrow, shot into a crowd. 3 others saw him in the club or parking lot before the shooting. 5 witnesses said that they saw King at the nightclub, but no one, as of yet, has said he had a firearm. 4 witnesses have pointed to Michael Smith and said that he was at the scene that night. 1 saw him with a gun, but didn't shoot it, and 2 saw him shooting a firearm. So you can see all these different witnesses are coming forward with different accounts of what they heard and saw. Now again, this was a crowded nightclub. It's not so fair to say, what did you see, what did you not see? But what also complicates this issue is the fact that many of these witnesses have ties to the actual altercation that erupted with this gunfire, which begs the question about credibility. Can you believe what they are saying? Do they have motivations to not tell the full truth? And I'm going to get into it a little bit more detail, but some of these witnesses made statements to police that are radically different from what they testified to in court. Now, we will have a live feed in this courtroom any minute, so we're going to make sure to go to it as soon as we do have live coverage. But I'm actually, to talk to a little bit about what we have today, I'm joined here by Prosecutor Wendy Patrick. Wendy, good to see you again on the Law&Crime Network.
Well.
So I want to talk about this case, okay? We have these witnesses who have given contradictory statements. There's ones who've said things different from what they testified to in court from their initial police statements.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that they are not pointing the fingers at these 3, but they're giving additional information that they didn't provide in their police interviews. What do you make of that?
What I make of it is sometimes being nervous, being put on the spot, anxiety being high can do one of 2 things. On the one hand, it can make witnesses forgetful and need to be have their memories refreshed, sometimes, God forbid, even impeached. On the other hand, there are some people who genuinely will say, I'm on the hot seat, I'm answering questions, and all of a sudden I remembered additional details that I wasn't able to recall when I initially spoke to officers. So the jury's job is to determine, which is it?
Now,
is it a fashion of worrying about retaliation, or trying to be honest, having remembered new details?
So there was one witness, Ebony Humans. She's friends with the Kendricks, who were both victims in this case.
Yes.
They were both shot. Now, she told police, she never told police that Smith and Barrow exchanged a gun. She also never told police that about a pepper spray incident. You know what, Wendy? We'll have to talk about that in a minute. We do have a live feed now in our courtroom, so let's go to it. Welcome back to the Law&Crime Network, everybody. This is Jesse Weber. I'm joined today by Wendy Patrick, prosecutor for the day. Wendy, good to see you here.
Nice to see you.
So we're waiting for the jury to be brought in this case. We were talking about what happened yesterday. Specifically, we were talking about certain witnesses providing different testimony from what they told in police interviews. And I'm specifically talking about Miss Humans, who she provided testimony that really went after Mr. Barrow that she didn't, and Mr. Smith, that she didn't include in her police interviews, saying that they exchanged a weapon, that Mr. Barrow had threatened to shoot her friend Danielle Kendrick if she had pepper sprayed him. None of this was brought up in the police interview, and she was pressured that she was lying. What do you think?
Well, we've seen this so many different times that it really doesn't necessarily mean anything, not definitively at least. There are lots of indications, especially as time goes by, that witnesses tend to remember more the more they think about an event. And that's counterintuitive because a lot of jurors expect that a witness is going to give the very first statement, it's going to be as complete as possible. With good reason. Your memory doesn't get better with time. It usually deteriorates with time, unlike fine wine. I always make that joke. But in a case like this, when actually emotions are high, anxiety is high, you're really on the hot seat, and your goal is to remember as many details as you can, many witnesses will report the more I thought about it, the more I remembered. So a jury's got to decide whether or not it's a credibility issue one way or another, and it doesn't necessarily mean when you remember additional details that you're lying. In fact, one of the things that distinguishes this case from somebody that recants is that it's not uncommon to remember more the more you really try to think about something. Whereas if you recant testimony, maybe that's even more of a credibility issue.
Now, Wendy, that's all well and good, and I like the way that you frame that, and I agree with you. But couldn't the opposite be true? That she's good friends with the victims in this case, and she wants to make sure that justice is served, and she wants to really point the finger at Barrow and Smith. And so the idea that she, you know, Mr. Gorley, who is one of the defense attorneys here, you know, he's representing Barrow in his cross-examination. He says, "Is that a reason for making things up today?" She says, "I'm not making things up." But doesn't the jury kind of think for a second, maybe she crafted her story after hearing more information about Barrow and Smith? Once they were identified as the defendants, maybe she said, okay, I'm going to craft my story with a few more details.
Absolutely. That's the defense argument. You know, they could have been asked in a less argumentative fashion.
Wendy, sorry to interrupt. We do have the audio. Let's listen now.
Speak with them about